For 27 years, she ruled the courtroom like a tyrant until one man stood up, exposed the truth, and had her arrested right at the bench. This isn't fiction. It's a reckoning. And once you hear what really happened, you'll never look at justice the same way again. That morning, Courtroom 3 of the Ashford County Supreme Court glowed softly with muted golden sunlight slipping through frosted window panes. The air was still yet heavy, not with heat, but with something far thicker. No chatter, no laughter, only the sound of a court stenographer typing and papers shuffling, lowly in lawyers' hands. Everyone assumed it would be another dull day, another stack of petty cases nobody would remember. At the judge's bench sat Geraldine Cole upright, like a marble statue, her sharp eyes radiating the same chill as her infamous rulings. She was a woman known statewide for eviscerating attorneys mid-sentence and hammering down the harshest punishments, especially when the defendant was black. She doesn't judge, they whispered, she sentences. But today she had no idea she'd be the one standing trial. The courtroom she ruled like a kingdom for 27 years was about to become the scene of her reckoning. The heavy doors at the back of the room creaked open. A tall black man entered dressed in a sharp gray suit. The hallway light grazed his face, highlighting a calm expression steeped in quiet resolve. He placed a worn leather briefcase down by his feet, adjusted his collar, and approached the plaintiff's podium. No one recognized him. Judge Cole squinted. Name and title, she snapped dryly. He didn't answer right away. He scanned the room, the empty defendant benches, the handful of relatives, the heavy silence. Then his eyes met hers directly. My name is Isaiah Merrick, Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. The room tensed. People sat straighter, heads turned. Even the court reporter paused, hands frozen over her keys. Cole's mouth tightened. Another federal complaint. Let me guess, she drawled. A race-baiting crusade. Isaiah didn't blink. He simply smiled. Not a warm smile, one that foreshadowed the storm to come. We don't have time for dramatics, Judge Cole said, tapping her pen against the bench. If you're here to deliver another sermon about injustice, I suggest you leave before I have security escort you out. Isaiah remained still, expression unchanging. I'm not here to deliver a speech, Your Honor. I'm here to uphold the law. A hush spread through the room. More eyes turned to him now. Cole leaned back with smug disdain. Oh, of course. Another performance from people who love to play victim. Isaiah turned to the court stenographer. You're recording this, right? She nodded slowly, visibly uneasy. Good, he said, voice steady. Then he reached down and unlatched his briefcase. The courtroom collectively held its breath. From inside, Isaiah pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. No one knew what was coming, but they all knew something irreversible had just begun. Isaiah walked up to the court bailiff and handed him the envelope. The man hesitated, glancing at Judge Cole. Just give it here, she barked. I'm not afraid of paperwork. She tore it open with impatience, but the arrogance on her face dissolved the moment her eyes caught the federal seal. Her hands stilled. Her breathing changed. What is this? She whispered. A federal arrest warrant, Isaiah replied. Signed this morning by Judge William Cargill. You're charged with abuse of authority, racially biased sentencing, and obstruction of justice across 53 separate cases. A thunderclap of shock rolled through the courtroom. Gasps, murmurs, disbelief. This is ridiculous, Cole shrieked. I am the law here. No, Isaiah said, reaching into his jacket to reveal a badge. Not anymore. The courtroom was no longer a courtroom, it was now a crime scene. Isaiah stepped forward, his voice low but unshakable. 12 years ago, you presided over my brother Malcolm Merrick's case. He was charged with drug possession without a shred of evidence. Cole's knuckles whitened on the bench. You refused to admit exculpatory footage. You dismissed our witnesses because they were black. You sentenced him to 15 years. Isaiah pulled out a photo. Malcolm beaming in his college graduation gown beneath a banner that read Clark Atlanta, class of 2010. He didn't survive his 10th year in prison. He died from blunt force trauma, beaten to death behind bars. His voice didn't crack. It burned. The courtroom hung on every word. Cole muttered, barely audible, I didn't know. You knew exactly what you were doing, Isaiah said. You just never thought you'd have to answer for it. From the back of the courtroom, two men in tailored black suits entered. One wore dark sunglasses. The other carried a slim case with a small, blinking red light, a live recording device. They moved with quiet precision toward the judge's bench. Their presence alone silenced the room. Agent Blake. FBI said the man with the glass of voice like steel. We're executing a federal arrest warrant. Judge Cole recoiled slightly, her eyes darting wildly. No one touches me. I am a superior court judge, she snapped, trying to summon authority that no longer answered. The court bailiffs stood motionless. Their orders came from higher up, and they knew it. Isaiah remained calm, his hand resting lightly on the courtroom table. He didn't have to say a word. The storm he had carried into this room was already tearing down the facade of power. Agent Blake stepped forward and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The courtroom braced for the fall. When the cuffs locked onto Judge Geraldine Cole's wrists with a sharp metallic click, the room split between stunned silence and rising tension. For decades, she'd handed down harsh sentences without flinching. Now her hands trembled beneath the weight of her own fate. An older woman stood from the third row, tears lining her cheeks. That's her, she whispered. She laughed while sending my son away for 20 years. Over a checkbook error. Another voice followed. I've prayed for this day. A smattering of claps rippled through the courtroom. Not loud, not rowdy, just raw, earned, relieved. Isaiah never turned around. His focus stayed on the eyes of the woman who once ruled this room like a tyrant. Justice doesn't arrive with a gun, he said, calm and clear. It arrives when someone dares to say enough. This is a disgrace, Cole shrieked, twisting in place. I am a high-ranking judge. I'll sue every one of you, called the governor. Agent Blake didn't respond. He turned to Isaiah and gave a simple nod. Isaiah stepped forward, facing the cameras now recording live. Make sure this is captured, he said, because this isn't just an arrest. It's an awakening. Judge Cole was led down the aisle between the gallery benches. Her designer heels clacked hollowly against the courtroom floor, a sound that once symbolized authority. Now it was just noise. Outside reporters were already gathering. The headlines had spread like wildfire. A judge arrested mid-trial by the very man she once tried to humiliate. There would be no escape for her now. And this was just the beginning. When the courtroom doors slammed shut behind Geraldine Cole, a strange stillness followed. Not disbelief, clarity. Like watching a dam finally burst after years of pressure. Isaiah remained at the plaintiff's table unmoving. One of the public defenders, a graying man named Miller, once mocked ruthlessly by Cole, approached and whispered, "Thank you." Isaiah nodded. A young reporter voice, trembling with adrenaline, asked Mr. Merrick, what would you say to those who still think justice never comes? Isaiah turned toward the gallery. Justice isn't late, he said. It just needs someone brave enough to call it by name. The room didn't erupt in applause. It didn't need to. The weight of truth was enough. And the hardest part was still to come. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, microphones extended. Isaiah said nothing. He walked down the stone steps, slowly breathing in the moment, not for pride, but for peace. A small boy, around 8, approached him. Dressed in a white shirt, clutching an old photograph, he looked up at Isaiah with wide, unblinking eyes. Are you a real hero? The boy asked. Isaiah crouched down. In the morning light, the boy's eyes glistened with innocent hope. No, Isaiah said softly. I'm just someone who refused to stay quiet. The photo the boy held was of a young man grinning beside a graduation banner. Isaiah froze. Who is this he? Yes, my brother. They said he stole, but really he just couldn't afford milk for me. Isaiah placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. Then today was for him, and tomorrow too. He stood and turned toward the flashing lights. Remember this, he said. Justice doesn't wear a robe or hold a gavel. It lives in the voice that finally says no more. That night, Isaiah didn't go home. He sat alone in his modest office, a single desk lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Outside, the city of Ashford slept. But inside, Isaiah was wide awake, surrounded by silence and stacks of yellowed paper. He opened an old folder. Inside were dozens of appeal letters, pleas sent over the years to reopen wrongful convictions. All ignored. All stamped denied, most by Geraldine Cole herself. Each page was someone's life derailed. A young man imprisoned because of a coerced confession. A mother stripped of custody because the judge doubted her stability. A father fired after being wrongly convicted of fraud. Isaiah's finger paused over one name. He remembered that case. The evidence was fabricated. Cole had thrown it out like trash. He whispered to no one, we'll reopen every file, every name, No one gets left behind. Just then his colleague Nina stepped in. The news is everywhere. The Attorney General's calling for a full investigation. Isaiah didn't look up. He already knew. My real fight had only just begun. The next morning, major newspapers blared the same headline. Superior Court judge arrested mid-trial. A judicial earthquake rocks Ashford. But Isaiah didn't read them. He was at home, standing in front of a newly framed photograph of Malcolm, his brother smiling under a graduation banner from Clark, Atlanta. Beneath it, Isaiah had placed a plaque with a single sentence, "You will never be forgotten." Meanwhile, in a holding cell at the Federal Detention Center, Geraldine Cole sat on a hard bench, her designer blazer replaced by a gray jumpsuit. No jury, no robe, just four walls and the sound of her breathing. An FBI investigator entered. "Would you like to speak with an attorney?" he asked. Cole blinked. I am the law." "Not anymore," he said, and walked out. On the other side of town, Isaiah tightened his tie. He was about to walk into the most important press conference of his life, not to celebrate, but to clean house. The conference hall was packed. Survivors, law students, reporters, people who had never met but all carried the same quiet hope. This time it might change. Isaiah stood at the podium, no notes, no script, just truth. "Justice is not a statue," he began. "It's not something built once and left to stand. It must be built every day, defended every day." He told them about Malcolm, about the courtroom that took his life, about the years it took just to be heard. "This is not a victory," he said. "It's a beginning. Because for every Malcolm, there are thousands more. And for every Judge Cole, there are others hiding behind the system." The room rose in a standing ovation, not for a man, but for a truth that had been buried too long. Within 72 hours, Isaiah's story sparked a national movement. In Chicago, a group of law students launched the Silent Justice Coalition, demanding audits of judicial rulings across multiple states. In Texas, a woman named Maria, who had lost custody of her son after a biased ruling, told her story on live television. Her interview went viral, hitting 2 million views in a day. Isaiah rang the bell, one legal analyst said. Now the whole country is listening. The Department of Justice announced a formal investigation into Ashford's judicial system, spanning 2 decades of rulings, misconduct, and buried appeals. Isaiah received thousands of letters and emails, but he didn't celebrate. As long as innocent people still sit in prison, he told Nina, "I'm not done." That night, Isaiah returned to the apartment he hadn't slept in for 3 days. It was modest, no plaques, no awards. Just a couch, a desk, and a single drawer, filled with things he couldn't let go. From inside, he pulled a notebook. Inside were Malcolm's last words, a letter he had written but never sent. "If you're reading this, I guess I didn't make it out. But don't let my story end here. If justice is real help, find me." Isaiah's hands shook. He sat down and opened a fresh page, this time not to remember the past, but to shape the future. For Malcolm. For every person buried under unjust rulings. For every name lost in sealed court files. Justice was no longer a theory. It had a name, a voice, and it was speaking loudly now. And from that night forward, Isaiah vowed justice would never go quiet again. That night, Isaiah didn't sleep. He remained at his office desk, surrounded by silence in a storm of case files. Outside the window, the city lights flickered dimly, but Isaiah's mind was ablaze. On the table lay a long list of cases, each tied to Judge Geraldine Cole. His pen hovered over every name. Each one was someone forgotten, lost in the machinery of biased justice. A broken family, a stolen future. Behind him, the office door opened. Nina stepped in quietly. "You need rest," she said gently. "You can't fix the whole system alone." "I'm not trying to fix everything," Isaiah said, eyes still on the files. "I just want to restore what was stolen." Nina walked over, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Then let's start tomorrow. We'll reopen every case." Together, outside, the first drops of rain kissed the windows. It wasn't a storm this time. It was cleansing. The next morning, in a special state Senate hearing, the Judiciary Oversight Committee made a stunning announcement. "We have uncovered over 70 questionable rulings from the bench of former Judge Geraldine Cole involving potential civil rights violations." Gasps filled the chamber. A senior journalist whispered, "This isn't just a scandal, it's a reckoning." Across the country, citizens began to share their own stories. Some from decades ago, some still unfolding. People who had once been silenced now realized they weren't alone. At a high school in Atlanta, a teacher played the now famous footage of Cole being handcuffed in her own courtroom. The students, many of whom had never believed the system could change, rose to their feet and clapped. Justice, for the first time in years, wasn't abstract. It was alive, and it was moving. Isaiah was invited to speak at the National Summit on Judicial Reform. He stood before a packed auditorium, activists, lawmakers, judges, and not a single seat was empty. "I'm not here to be praised," Isaiah began. "I'm here to remind you we don't inherit justice. We build it." He shared Malcolm's story. He spoke of Cole, but mostly he spoke of the people still trapped in a broken system. Sometimes his voice cracked. You have to lose someone close before you realize justice isn't self-sustaining. It needs guardians, people who don't sleep, people who don't flinch. The room was silent, not out of apathy, but awe. And when they finally rose to applaud, it wasn't for Isaiah. It was for Malcolm, and for every voice that had been buried in the shadows. In a federal holding facility, Geraldine Cole sat across from a DOJ investigator. Her face was pale, her voice raw. "You once believed you were untouchable," the investigator said. "What do you believe now?" Cole exhaled slowly. "I believe power protected me. And now I see that every sentence I handed down is handing one down to me now." The agent paused. "Do you regret anything?" A long silence followed. Then she said softly, "Malcolm Merrick. He may have been the first innocent man I knowingly destroyed." She didn't cry. Not because she didn't feel shame, but because some sins are too deep for tears. A week later, the Ashford County Courthouse reopened its doors, not for sentencing, but for healing. The very first case retried under the new judicial review was one Cole had presided over 18 years ago. Judge Daxton Reed now sat on the bench, a man known for fairness and quiet strength. The defendant stood trembling, having spent nearly 2 decades behind bars. "We've reviewed the evidence," Judge Reed declared, "and this court finds the defendant not guilty." A gasp rippled through the room. The man wept. Isaiah was there to witness it, standing by the exit. When the man walked free, Isaiah opened his arms, and the two embraced as if they had known each other their whole lives. Outside, crowds had gathered, not in protest but in solidarity. Justice had spoken again, and this time, people were listening. That evening, Isaiah returned to a small house tucked away in Ashford's South End. Inside, his mother, Malcolm's mother, was waiting. The walls were quiet now, the laughter of 2 sons long replaced by framed photos and faded memories. She opened the door, eyes misted. "You did it," she whispered, pulling Isaiah into a tight embrace. They sat together on the old couch, the weight of what had been and what was still to come settling between them. Then she reached into a drawer and pulled out a letter yellowed at the edges. "It's from Malcolm," she said. "He wrote it before everything." Isaiah opened it, hands trembling. "If you're reading this, it probably means I didn't make it home. But don't let that stop you. Don't let me disappear. If justice ever comes, let it find me too." Isaiah blinked back tears. His voice cracked as he whispered, "You've been found, Malcolm, and the world will never forget you." The following week, Isaiah launched a national initiative called the Light Project, a coalition of lawyers, investigators, and independent journalists committed to re-examining old convictions tied to judicial bias. "We can't wait for mistakes," Isaiah said at the launch. "We need to stop injustice before it starts." Within 72 hours, over 200 legal offices signed up. Law schools offered interns. Retired judges called in to help. Survivors sent in boxes of old files, desperate for someone to look again. What started as a courtroom moment had become a movement. And for the first time in decades, the people had a system that would finally look back and listen. At a special TEDx conference on systemic reform, Isaiah was the keynote speaker. The audience was global. Millions tuned in online. Justice, he began, isn't a place you arrive. It's a road you walk. Every step, every time you say this isn't right, you move the world forward. He paused, eyes sweeping the crowd. "We can't treat justice like a symbol. It's a choice, a fight, a refusal to accept the unacceptable." The room rose to its feet, not for applause, but because something inside them had shifted. They weren't watching a story. They were becoming part of it. As the conference ended and cameras powered down, Isaiah stepped outside. Waiting at the exit was a young girl no older than 10, clutching a laminated newspaper clipping his face on the front headline, "Bold the day a judge was arrested in her own courtroom." Mr. Isaiah, she said shyly, I want to be a lawyer, like you, so I can protect people like my mom. He knelt down gently. What's your mom's name, Clara? She said. She was arrested because we couldn't afford formula and they said she stole it. Isaiah closed his eyes for a moment, then looked into the girls. Then you're already stronger than most people I know, he said. And when you grow up, I promise you this world will be better for you. She smiled. And Isaiah knew the next generation had already begun writing their own verdicts. 1 year after Geraldine Cole's arrest, more than 300 convictions had been reviewed. 74 people were cleared. Dozens reunited with families. Some just walked free for the first time in decades. Isaiah still worked from his modest office. Same desk, same lamp. But now above the wall hung two frames. One a photo of Malcolm, the other a plaque that read, Justice is not a person. It is all of us. On the final day of hearings related to Cole's rulings, an elderly man stepped out of court free after 17 years. Isaiah was waiting by the door. They hugged like brothers. As they walked down the steps, a journalist called out, Mr. Merrick, you're a national icon now. Will you take a break? Isaiah smiled gently. No, he said, because as long as there's one person still, silence my work isn't done. Justice isn't a robe, a bench, or a badge. It's the courage to speak truth when silence is safer. Isaiah Merrick didn't just expose a corrupt judge. He awakened a system long asleep. And he reminded us all, no matter who you are, where you come from, or what they say, you have the power to stand up. You belong, you matter. And when enough of us speak, even the most untouchable will have to answer.